Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Madam Deputy Minister, I'm very happy to see you on the call. It's such an honor to be with you, but it's even more of an honor because we have a lot of colleagues and development partners and civil society representatives that are joining us. As the colleague had just mentioned, I could see only 100, but I am learning that there are many more that are joining us today, either online or through the Facebook connection. Let me first start by congratulating you all on this very important discussion for the implementation of the Ukraine's National Human Rights Strategy and its action plan. Clearly, this platform has become an important one where we can bring together civil society activists, technical experts on the topic, but also government representative and the ministry, the main custodian of this type of work for the strategy. It's an important traditional meeting now that takes place almost every year just before the International Human Rights Day, not only to take stock of the progress achieved today, but also to agree on the follow-up actions and plan for future initiatives and draw some lessons learned. I already listened carefully and took notes of the brief presentation of the Deputy Minister. Clearly, you're listening to the civil society. It's very important, this exchange and this engagement. It confirms actually not only your readiness to engage, but also your preparedness to see what is feasible, what is practical, and what are the priorities of the civil society organizations in Ukraine. And that is in itself an advanced step, I would say, in inclusive democratic processes. So congratulations on this one. I look forward also to listen to the next steps and the 3 years action plan for the strategy. As you indicated, we have been supporting, as United Nations Development Program, of course, with other UN agencies, we have been supporting the work of the ministry and the work on the human rights strategy that was long awaited since 2015. And we're quite happy to see the commitment of Ukraine to respect, but also to move forward on its human rights obligations. It was crucial for the country back then to ensure that the human rights challenges that you're facing due to the conflict and other reasons would be captured and have a clear strategy on the way forward and have a specific human rights agenda with measurable targets and goals. I took notes of the comment and feedback from the civil society that there were many probably indicators, targets, and activities to be done. And as I said, I look forward to hear your presentation for the way forward. Clearly, this last year of the implementation of the action plan was a challenging one, with COVID-19 pandemic affecting not only the work of the ministry and the civil society and all human rights activists, but also it has affected all aspects of our life and work, and it has not been an easy process. So just to reiterate that during this time of uncertainty, one thing is certainly crystal clear for all of us, that we must not let the pandemic set back the progress made or turn away even from the path of the National Human Rights Strategy agreement between, again, the ministry and the people. On the contrary, this is actually a high time for all of us to evaluate together our achievements, to set up new goals, not small ones, but also big ones as needed, and to roll up our sleeves and to work even harder to make these human rights at the top level agenda of the next year's state program and state agenda on this topic. It's quite important to note that when we talk about a clear and realistic vision for the human rights in Ukraine, this only gives us a roadmap to guide the way forward, to provide lights and markers to safeguard the route that leaves no one behind, including the most vulnerable and marginalized groups of men and women. And it's also important that when we look at who is benefiting from this National Human Rights Strategy and its action plan, we ensure that the owners are engaging in its implementation in the right way, looking on the performance of the activities on schedule and ensuring that it's actually linked as is to the key international human rights recommendations made to Ukraine by the UN human rights mechanisms, whether the treaty bodies or the special procedures, or particularly the Universal Periodic Review. The achievements and the implementation of the strategy demonstrate the country's progress in fulfilling its international human rights commitments. Not only that, but it also actually confirms Ukraine's commitment to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. For the United Nations Development Programme, it's quite important for us to always take, to look at the big picture and to take what we call a whole of society and a whole of a government approach, to see that whatever is being planned is not planned in silos, and then the human rights strategy in particular impacts all walks of life and all aspects and different groups, if not all groups actually altogether. The clear and very strong correlation between the National Human Rights Strategy and the Agenda 2030 for the implementation and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals can only be seen when we plan together and implement comprehensively. Few examples just to clarify. When the state, for instance, takes steps to implement recommendations from the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, it is actually making progress in achieving SDG 5 on gender equality, but also SDG 4 on quality education. So you actually serve different perspectives and different objectives of development of Ukrainian people by ensuring that the human rights strategy is as inclusive and as gender sensitive in that sense. Another example is that normally by establishing a system of investigating crimes, for instance, related to torture, and this was mentioned, Ukraine will not only adhere to its human rights strategy, but will also ensure that it is implementing the recommendations of the UN Committee Against Torture, and will move forward in implementing the SDG 16, which talks and focuses particularly about the strong institutions and their capacity to be inclusive, peaceful, and more just. And once again, this platform in itself is very important and shows the commitment of the engagement altogether. This codependency definitely demonstrates that by achieving progress in one field, we can certainly see the positive impact and difference that is made in all other areas of lives for men and women, boys and girls in Ukraine. And this is very important. And in that sense, I would like to thank really the Ministry of Justice and the civil society organizations joining us today for taking this, the lead in updating the National Human Rights Strategy and developing the new action plan covering the period from 2021 to 2023. And all is done through broad and participatory stakeholder consultations, which we really highly commend. Again, this platform is another example of the collaboration and the participation between different groups and how the government is engaged in that sense. It's also important to highlight that for us, we, as UNDP, we see the inclusivity and the whole of government approach and society approach when we see the parliament also engaged, and when we see members of the parliament participating in these discussions, because eventually the Human Rights Action Plan will be a guiding light for their work and will inform the way forward when they work on legislations and other related issues. So, to wrap up this week, basically from today until the International Human Rights Day on 10th of December, we have an opportunity, a very important opportunity to reaffirm the importance of the human rights and rebuilding the world we want and the need for global solidarity. Clearly this year, the theme focuses pretty much on COVID-19 pandemic and the need to build back better, but we can only do that when we ensure that human rights are an integral part, if not a central part, to our recovery efforts, whether social recovery or economic recovery or even health services being provided. We will only reach our common global goals eventually if we are able to create equal opportunities for all and apply human rights standards to tackle entrenched, systematic, and intergenerational inequalities, exclusion, and discrimination. And that this discourse and dialogue today is quite important. We could all recall what Nelson Mandela once famously said, that to deny people their human rights, it's actually to challenge their very humanity. No country can actually progress and achieve higher levels of development without ensuring that the human rights of its citizens are respected, without ensuring that the voices of its citizens are well heard. And that's what we really rely on to see today. through the productive and action-oriented discussion. I look forward to hearing the results of the work that you have done before, but also the outcomes of the discussion today, because it will not only help us identify where do we stand in terms of advancing in the implementation of the National Human Rights Strategy, but also it informs the way forward and let us know how can we improve the new 3-year action plan for the human rights. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, impressive attendance. We look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you so much.